You ask a coworker if they can jump on a call at 3. They say yes. And then, unprompted, tell you their whole afternoon is technically already spoken for. But they'll rearrange something, and they hope that's okay. And they didn't mean to make it complicated, and really it's fine, truly. You asked one question. You got a small essay of justification in return. From the outside, it looks like thoughtfulness. Maybe even generosity. Someone who cares enough to keep you fully informed. But watch closely, and you'll notice something else underneath it. A kind of quiet panic, dressed up as politeness. Because for a person who over-explains, a short answer doesn't feel safe. It feels like leaving a door open for someone to walk through and think badly of them. So they talk and talk, building a small fortress of context around every decision, every no, every late reply, not to inform you, but to protect themselves from a judgment that most of the time was never coming in the first place. Today, we're going to decode why some people can't just say, "I can't make it," and leave it there, and what it actually costs them to keep building those fortresses, sentence by sentence, every single day. Psychology tends to trace this pattern back to 2 different roots, and they don't always show up alone. Often they tangle together in the same person. The first is simply how someone is wired. Some people are born with a nervous system that takes in more of the world than most. Researchers call this sensory processing sensitivity, and people who carry it are often known as highly sensitive persons, or HSPs. Think of their nervous system as a much finer filter than average, one that lets in more of everything. Tone shifts, facial changes, the tiny weight of a pause. For someone with this wiring, a flat okay from a friend doesn't just register as neutral, it registers as data, something that needs to be accounted for. And the instinct to explain becomes a way of managing all that extra incoming signal, a way of making sure nothing is left for someone else to misread. The second root goes deeper, and it isn't about wiring at all, it's about history. Psychology calls it hypervigilance, and it tends to grow out of childhoods where safety wasn't guaranteed, where affection had to be earned or defended. Picture a child whose parents' mood could flip without warning. Calm 1 hour, cold and clipped the next. That child learns to explain before being asked. They learn to say, "I was just in my room, I wasn't doing anything, I promise," before anyone has even raised a question. Because in that house, silence around an action was once mistaken for guilt, and guilt came with consequences. Their amygdala, the brain's built-in alarm system, logs the pattern early. Unexplained things get punished. Talk first. Cover every angle. Nobody sat that child down and taught them this. Their nervous system built it alone, out of necessity. And by adulthood, they usually don't remember choosing it. It just feels like who they are. They are not broken, and they were never too much. They were simply a child who adapted brilliantly to a world that didn't explain itself back to them. This is the most visible sign, and also the most exhausting one to witness from the outside. A friend asks a casual, low-stakes question, "You coming Friday?" And instead of a simple no, they get a paragraph. Work's been brutal. They promised themselves an early night. They've barely unpacked from last weekend. They really do want to come next time. They hope that's not weird. Nobody asked for a reason. The friend would have accepted "not this week" without a second thought. But the over-explainer's mind runs a quieter script underneath. If I don't give them enough, they'll fill in the blank with something worse about me. I have to close every gap before they can walk through it. The explanation was never really for the friend. It was armor, built in real time, aimed at a judgment that mostly exists only in their own head. And every time they build it, they walk away a little more tired, having spent energy defending against an accusation nobody made. This one lives in the prefrontal cortex, home of metacognition, our ability to think about our own thinking. Everyone uses this ability sometimes. For the over-explainer, it runs almost constantly, usually pointed at anticipated disapproval, before saying no to a request, before asking for a raise, before even sending a slightly overdue text. They'll rehearse the wording, in the shower, on the drive home, staring at the ceiling at midnight. Not just what to say, but how to phrase it so it's airtight, so it can't be twisted, so no one could possibly walk away thinking less of them. Let me add one more line, just in case they take it the wrong way. The conversation hasn't even happened yet, and they've already drafted 3 defenses for it. By the time they actually speak, they're not communicating anymore. They're performing a legal brief. And the toll is a kind of quiet, invisible fatigue that builds long before the real conversation even starts. This connects to theory of mind, our built-in ability to guess what someone else might be thinking or feeling. In most people, it runs in the background, occasionally helpful. In the over-explainer, it runs hot, and it defaults almost every time to the worst possible read. A coworker replies to their message with a short, "Got it, thanks." That's it. 2 words. Most people move on without a second thought. The over-explainer sits with it. Was that curt? Are they annoyed with me? Did I do something? Within minutes, a follow-up message appears. Unprompted context, an extra explanation, an apology for nothing in particular, trying to smooth over a wrinkle that was never actually there. They are, in effect, arguing with a version of the other person that only exists in their own imagination. And because that imagined version is never fully satisfied, the explaining never quite feels finished either. It leaves them scanning every short reply for hidden meaning, and slowly, that scanning becomes its own kind of loneliness, trusting the surface of an interaction less and less. Empathy, at its most basic, is cognitive, simply understanding what someone else might be feeling. But for many over-explainers, it tips into something heavier, emotional empathy tied to mirror neurons, where they don't just recognize another person's discomfort. They feel it land in their own chest. If a friend seems a little quiet, or a partner sighs slightly too heavily, the over-explainer doesn't wait to find out why. They assume it's about them and immediately start explaining, clarifying, softening. Let me tell you what I actually meant, in case that came out wrong. Even when the other person's mood has nothing to do with them at all, they become the unofficial translator of every room they're in, constantly re-explaining themselves so no one else ever has to sit with an unclear moment for more than a few seconds. It's generous. It's also unsustainable, because somewhere along the way, they stop being able to tell the difference between someone else's discomfort and their own responsibility to fix it, and that confusion is heavy to carry alone. This ties to interoception, the brain's ability to sense what's happening inside the body, processed largely by the insular cortex. For the over-explainer, the moment a conversation feels even slightly unresolved, the body reacts before the mind has finished the thought. A tight chest, a stomach that won't settle, a restlessness that doesn't have a name yet. That physical unease becomes the real engine driving the behavior. It isn't really about the words at that point. It's about needing the tightness in their chest to stop. And the only tool they've ever learned for that is more talking, more context, one more clarifying sentence, until the body finally exhales. Which means the explaining isn't a communication strategy at all by the end. It's a nervous system trying to regulate itself out loud in front of other people in real time. Here is where the pattern quietly hardens into something bigger than a habit. What began as a way to be understood slowly turns into a way to control how they're perceived. An attempt to manage other people's opinions of them before those opinions can even form. If they explain enough, cover every angle, predict every possible misread, maybe they'll never again face the sting of disappointment or rejection they once couldn't control as a child. But a defense built entirely on explanation is exhausting to maintain, and it eventually tips into analysis paralysis, replaying conversations after they're over, drafting and redrafting a 2-line text message, lying awake reconstructing what they should have said instead. Rather than living inside a relationship, they start managing it from the outside, like an editor endlessly revising a manuscript that was never actually broken in the first place. Safety gets purchased, but presence gets spent to pay for it. Life stops being lived and starts being managed, like a high-risk project that requires constant monitoring, with no room left for anything to simply be fine without a report attached to it. The goal was never to become quieter, or to stop caring how their words land on people. The goal is to stop treating every silence, every short reply, every neutral face as a fire that needs to be put out with words. A few principles tend to help. A short answer is a complete answer. I can't make it doesn't need 3 reasons stapled to the back of it to be valid. Most people accept a simple boundary far more easily than the over-explainer assumes they will. Not every neutral reaction is a verdict. A short reply, a flat tone, a quiet pause. These are usually exactly what they look like. Someone tired, someone distracted, someone thinking about something else entirely. They are not always evidence that needs to be argued against. You're allowed to let people misunderstand you sometimes. This is the hardest one. Not every gap in understanding is an emergency. Some relationships can hold a little ambiguity without falling apart, and learning to trust that is often the real work underneath all of this. When someone begins practicing this, something gentle starts to change. They don't stop being thoughtful, and they don't stop caring. What changes is the intensity. The explaining shifts from a floodlight, aimed defensively at every possible doubt, into something closer to a small lamp, offered only when it's genuinely wanted. They start speaking because they choose to, not because silence has started to feel like danger, and the words finally get lighter, because they do too. If you've ever caught yourself explaining something nobody questioned, or rehearsing an apology for a mistake you didn't actually make, that isn't a character flaw. It's a nervous system that once had to work overtime to stay safe, and it simply hasn't gotten the memo yet that it doesn't have to work that hard anymore. If this sounded familiar, tell me in the comments which sign hit closest to home for you. And if this video helped you understand yourself, or someone you love, a little better, give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear that a short answer is allowed to be enough. Thank you for watching. I'm Mindit. I'll see you in the next one.